Dr. Nia Coleman stood triumphant in an Atlanta courtroom. Her fraud charges dismissed after a sealed CIA file stunned the judge, proving her top-secret life. Cameras flashed. Reporters hailed her as a hidden hero. Then, as she stepped onto the sunlit steps, a sniper's bullet grazed her ear, blood dripping onto her collar. Screams erupted. She dove behind a pillar, heart racing. Victory had morphed into a death warrant, a shadow she'd carry forever. Who wanted her silenced? Before we dive in, let me know where you're watching from, and if you stand for truth over corruption, hit like and subscribe for more stories of justice unfolding. Nia Coleman stepped out of a beat-up taxi onto the cracked pavement outside Fulton County Courthouse in Atlanta, Georgia, on a sweltering July morning. The air hung thick with humidity, 98 degrees Fahrenheit by 8 a.m., the kind of heat that made her navy blazer cling to her skin. At 42, she carried herself with a quiet dignity, her 5'6" frame unbowed despite the storm brewing around her. Her short, coiled hair glistened with sweat, and her deep brown eyes scanned the crowd of reporters already gathering like vultures on the courthouse steps. She'd spent 15 years as a cryptologist, decoding secrets that kept the nation safe, but today she was the one under scrutiny, accused of faking her PhD and lucrative government contracts. The irony wasn't lost on her. A black woman who'd climbed the ranks of the CIA, now branded a fraud by a system that never wanted her to succeed. Inside, the courthouse buzzed with a frenetic energy that matched the cicadas droning outside. The marble floors gleamed under fluorescent lights, reflecting the hurried steps of bailiffs in starched uniforms and attorneys clutching briefcases. Nia took her seat at the defense table, her hands folded tightly in her lap, her tailored skirt brushing her knees. Across the room, the prosecution's table loomed, stacked with files and folders labeled in bold red ink. Victor Hensley, the assistant district attorney, stood there adjusting his tie. A wiry white man in his late 30s, with a sharp jawline and a glint of ambition in his pale blue eyes. His reputation preceded him, a climber who'd built his career on high-profile takedowns, especially ones that played well to the conservative base. Nia could feel his gaze on her, a smirk tugging at his lips as if he'd already won. The courtroom filled quickly, the gallery packed with spectators. Curious locals, a few of Nia's old neighbors from Decatur, and a swarm of journalists scribbling notes. The jury filed in, 12 faces staring at her from the box, all white, their expressions ranging from bored to openly hostile. She'd seen that look before, the one that sized her up and found her wanting, not because of evidence, but because of the color of her skin. Judge Harold Grayson took his seat at the bench, his heavy jowls set in a permanent scowl beneath a shock of gray hair. At 63, he was known for running a tight ship, his rulings often favoring the prosecution in cases like this. Nia's lawyer, Marcus Tate, a broad-shouldered black man in his 50s with a salt and pepper beard, leaned over to whisper, "Stay calm, Nia. We've got this." But the tremor in his voice betrayed his nerves. Hensley rose to his feet, buttoning his dark suit jacket with a flourish, and addressed the court. "Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, today we unravel a web of deceit spun by Dr. Nia Coleman," he began, his voice smooth and cutting, dripping with condescension. He paced before the jury, hands clasped behind his back. "This woman claims to hold a PhD from Georgia Tech, to have worked on sensitive government contracts worth millions. Yet when we dug into her past, we found nothing. No transcripts, no employment records, no proof she's anything more than a con artist preying on the system." The gallery murmured, pencils scratching faster. Nia's stomach twisted, but she kept her face a mask of stone, refusing to give him the satisfaction of a reaction. Hensley turned to a wooden easel, unveiling a blown-up image of a diploma bearing her name, the Georgia Tech seal prominently displayed. "Exhibit A," he declared, tapping the paper with a pointer. "This document, allegedly proving her credentials, surfaced in our investigation. But here's the kicker. Georgia Tech has no record of Nia Coleman ever enrolling, let alone graduating. We had forensic analysts examine it, and they confirmed what we suspected. It's a forgery, a cheap fake cooked up to bolster her lies." He paused, letting the accusation hang in the air, then spun to face the jury. She's not a doctor. She's not a scientist. She's a fraud, plain and simple, banking on her charm to skate by while taxpayers foot the bill. The courtroom erupted in whispers, a low hum of shock and judgment rippling through the crowd. Nia's nails dug into her palms, the sting grounding her as Hensley's words sank in. She'd earned that degree, buried under a cover identity the CIA had crafted to protect her missions. But she couldn't say that, not here, not without clearance. Marcus shot to his feet, adjusting his glasses. Objection, Your Honor. The prosecution's painting a narrative without context. Dr. Coleman's records are sealed due to the sensitive nature of her work, which we'll prove in due course. Judge Grayson waved a dismissive hand, his voice gruff. Overruled. The jury can hear the evidence and decide for themselves. Proceed, Mr. Hensley. Hensley grinned, a predator sensing blood. He called his first witness, a pinched-faced registrar from Georgia Tech named Ellen Carter, her blonde bob swaying as she took the stand. Under oath, she testified in a clipped tone. We searched our archives back 20 years. There's no Nia Coleman in our system, no record of her attending a single class. That diploma, it's not ours. The jury leaned forward, some nodding as if they'd expected nothing less from someone like her. Nia caught a juror in the back row, a middle-aged man with a buzz cut, muttering something to his neighbor, his lips curling in disdain. She didn't need to hear it to know what he'd said, some variation of typical, the kind of assumption that had dogged her since childhood. Marcus cross-examined, his baritone steady but strained. Ms. Carter, is it possible records could be withheld for security reasons, say under federal directive? Carter frowned, adjusting her glasses. Possible, sure, but we'd have a trace of it. There's nothing. She's a ghost. Marcus pressed, so you can't rule out classified involvement, Hensley objected, voice sharp. Speculation, Your Honor. The defense is grasping at straws. Grayson sustained it, banging his gavel. Stick to the facts, Mr. Tate. Marcus sat, frustration etching lines into his forehead, while Nia felt the walls closing in. The system wasn't built to see. Her is anything but a liar. Outside, the media frenzy grew, reporters clustering under the courthouse's stone archway, their cameras trained on the entrance. By noon, headlines screamed across Atlanta, Black woman's fraud case rocks city. Mystery defendant's lies exposed. Nia slipped out a side door during recess, her head low, but a journalist spotted her, shoving a microphone in her face. Dr. Coleman, how do you explain the fake diploma? Are you scamming the government? She pushed past, jaw tight, but the question echoed in her mind. Back in the courtroom, Hensley kept up the assault, piling on emails from Nia requesting contracts she'd never sent, each one a fabrication she couldn't disprove without blowing her cover. The day wore on, the heat seeping through the courthouse walls, turning the air stale. Nia's blazer felt like a straitjacket, but she refused to slouch, refused to let them see her crack. Hensley circled back to the jury, his closing for the day a masterstroke of venom. This isn't about oversight or bureaucracy. This is about a woman who thought she could game the system, hide behind a title she never earned, and laugh all the way to the bank. She's not a victim. She's a predator. The jury nodded, some crossing their arms, their eyes cold. Nia's heart sank, not because she doubted herself, but because she saw the truth. To them, her blackness was the real crime. As the gavel fell, ending the session, Nia stood, smoothing her skirt with trembling hands. Marcus muttered, "We'll fight this, Nia. They don't know who they're dealing with." She nodded, but doubt gnawed at her. She'd faced dictators and terrorists, cracked codes that stopped wars, yet here, in this room, she was powerless. The reporters swarmed again as she left, their questions a barrage. Why no records, Nia? What's the real story? She kept walking, the sun blazing overhead, her shadow stretching long and thin across the pavement. Back at her motel room that night, she flipped on the TV, wincing as a local anchor dissected her fall from grace, his tone dripping with smug certainty. Another case of entitlement gone wrong, he said, and Nia clicked it off, the silence heavier than the accusations. She paced the threadbare carpet, replaying Hensley's smirk, the jury's glares, the forged diploma that mocked her real achievements. This wasn't just a trial, it was a lynching dressed up in legal robes. She'd survived worse, she told herself. Covert ops in hostile lands, nights without sleep decoding threats. But this felt different, personal. A blade aimed at her soul. The phone rang, Marcus's voice crackling through. "They're digging deeper, Nia. Hensley's got something big planned for tomorrow." She exhaled, staring at the peeling wallpaper. "Let him try," she said, her voice steel. She hung up, sinking onto the lumpy bed, knowing the worst was yet to come. Hensley wasn't just after a conviction. He wanted her erased, a black woman too smart, too strong, reduced to a cautionary tale. And he was only getting started. The second day of Nia Coleman's trial dawned over Atlanta, with a sky bruised purple by storm clouds, the humidity pressing down like a fist. Inside Fulton County Courthouse, the air conditioning hummed feebly against the 95-degree heat seeping through the walls, leaving the packed courtroom sticky and restless. Nia sat at the defense table, her navy blazer swapped for a crisp gray blouse, her posture rigid despite the exhaustion tugging at her bones. The gallery buzzed louder than yesterday, spectators craning their necks to catch a glimpse of the mystery woman whose face now plastered every newsstand in the city. Her deep brown eyes flicked to the jury, their pale faces still etched with suspicion, and she wondered if they'd already convicted her in their minds. What did they see when they looked at her? A scholar, a threat, or just another black face to distrust? Victor Hensley strode in, his dark suit pristine despite the muggy air, a predator's gleam in his pale blue eyes. He carried a stack of files, under one arm, his wiry frame moving with purpose as he set them down with a deliberate thud. Judge Harold Grayson settled onto the bench, his jowls quivering as he adjusted his robes, his gaze sliding over Nia with a flicker of contempt. She'd learned overnight that Grayson had a reputation beyond his stern rulings, a man who'd once bragged at a country club about keeping Atlanta in line, code for cracking down on anyone who didn't fit his narrow vision of order. Her lawyer, Marcus Tate, leaned close, his voice a low rumble. "They're coming hard today, Nia. Stay." "Sharp," she nodded, her jaw tight, bracing for the next blow. Hensley wasted no time, calling his first witness with a flourish. "The prosecution calls Paul Grayson to the stand," he announced, and a murmur rippled through the room. Paul, a stocky, white man in his 40s with a receding hairline and a smug twist to his mouth, swaggered up, his polished loafers clicking on the marble floor. Nia's stomach sank as she registered the name. Grayson, the judge's nephew. Conflict of interest. Didn't seem to faze anyone here. Paul swore in, his hand on the Bible, then settled into the witness chair, his eyes locking onto hers with a glint of malice. Hensley approached, hands clasped behind his back. "Mr. Grayson, you worked at the Savannah Policy Institute, correct?" Paul nodded, his voice oily. "That's right, 5 years senior analyst." "And did you ever encounter the defendant, Nia Coleman, during your tenure?" Hensley asked, his tone leading. Paul smirked, leaning forward. "Oh yeah, she showed up out of nowhere, claiming she was some big-shot researcher. Said she had a PhD, government contracts, the works. But here's the thing, we checked our records. She was never on payroll, never on a single project. She'd hang around asking questions, digging into stuff she had no business touching, then poof, gone, like she'd never been there." Jury shifted, some scribbling notes, others nodding as if Paul's words confirmed every stereotype they'd brought into the room. Nia's nails bit into her palms. She'd been there, under a CIA alias, tracking a leak that saved lives. But that truth was locked away, useless now. Hensley pressed on, his voice rising for effect. "So in your opinion, was Ms. Coleman a legitimate employee?" Paul chuckled, a sound that grated on Nia's nerves. "Legitimate? No way. She tricked her way in, probably thought we wouldn't notice a black girl playing dress-up in a place like that. We're not that dumb." The gallery gasped, a few chuckles breaking through the tension, and Nia's blood boiled. The dog whistle wasn't subtle, it was a foghorn, blaring racism for all to hear. Marcus shot to his feet, his baritone cutting through. "Objection, Your Honor. Inflammatory and baseless prejudice." Judge Grayson banged his gavel, but his eyes twinkled with amusement. "Overruled. The witness is entitled to his perspective. Sit down, Mr. Tate." Marcus sank back, his fists clenched while Hensley circled the stand like a shark. "No further questions," he said, tossing a triumphant glance at Nia. Marcus took his turn, rising with a calm that belied the storm in his chest. "Mr. Grayson, is it possible Ms. Coleman's records were sealed for security reasons, perhaps tied to federal work?" Paul snorted, crossing his arms. "Sealed? That's a fancy excuse. We'd have known if she was legit. She wasn't. End of story." Marcus pushed. "So you're saying there's no chance her presence was classified?" Hensley jumped in, voice sharp. "Objection! Speculative nonsense." Grayson sustained it, his gavel a hammer on Nia's hopes. "Move on, Mr. Tate." Marcus sat, defeated, while Paul stepped down, his smirk a blade in Nia's side. The trial paused for a recess, and Nia slipped into the hallway, the marble cool under her flats. She splashed water on her face in the bathroom, staring at her reflection, a woman who'd faced death abroad, now crumbling under lies at home. Back in the courtroom, Hensley upped the ante. He played a video on a projector, grainy footage of Nia leaving the Savannah Institute years ago, her head low, captioned with "Mystery Woman Exposed." The clip cut to a news anchor, a white woman with a pinched smile saying, "Sources claim Coleman's past is a blank slate. Is she a mastermind or a myth?" the jury whispered, their eyes narrowing. Nia realized Hensley had leaked it overnight, priming the city to see her as a villain before the gavel even fell. Outside, the storm broke, rain pounding the courthouse windows as the day ended. Nia stepped into the deluge, her umbrella useless, against the wind, and caught a cab to her motel. She'd barely settled in, flipping on the TV to drown out the thunder, when her phone buzzed. Marcus's voice crackled through, urgent. "Check the news, Nia, it's bad." She switched channels, and there it was, a live feed of protesters outside her old Decatur apartment 30 miles away. A mob of white men in trucker hats waved signs reading, "Lock her up," and "No more lies," their voices a chorus of slurs she could hear through the screen. "Go back where you came from." The camera panned to a reporter, a young guy in a raincoat, shouting, "Tensions rise as Coleman's trial fuels outrage. Who is she really?" Nia's heart raced as the feed cut to her building, its brick facade now a canvas of hate. Windows shattered, glass glinting in the streetlights, and the word fraud sprawled across her door in dripping red paint. She dropped the remote, her breath shallow. This wasn't random. It was coordinated, Hensley's fingerprints all over it. She'd seen his type before, powerful men who'd rather burn the world than lose face. The TV droned on, the anchor speculating, "Police say it's vandalism, but locals call it justice." Justice? For what? Being black and brilliant in a world that refused to see either? She grabbed her phone, dialing Marcus. "They hit my place," she said, voice steady despite the tremor in her chest. "Hensley's behind this, I know it." Marcus sighed, heavy. "I'll file a report, but Grayson won't care. He's in deep with Victor. We need something big, Nia, or they'll bury you." She hung up, pacing the motel's faded carpet, the rain a relentless drumbeat outside. Her mind spun. Paul's lies, the jury's glares, the mob's rage. This wasn't just a trial anymore, it was a war, and she was the target. She sank onto the bed, the springs creaking, and stared at the ceiling. How far would Hensley go to break her? Could she outsmart him without breaking her oath? The night stretched on, the storm raging, mirroring the chaos in her soul. She'd survived worse, she told herself. Missions in deserts, interrogations in cellars. But this felt different. A betrayal by the country she'd bled for. The vandals hadn't just smashed her windows, they'd shattered her illusion of safety. She closed her eyes, willing sleep to come, but the red paint lingered in her mind, a warning of worse to come. Hensley wasn't done. The judge wasn't impartial. And the mob, they'd be back. She'd need more than grit to survive this. She'd need a miracle, or a weapon sharper than their hate. Think Paul's smirk proves Nia's up against a rigged game. Drop a number 1 in the comments if you agree the deck's stacked against her. Wondering if the jury's already made up their minds based on her skin, not the facts. Hit like if you're rooting for her to flip this mess upside down. And if you're hooked on seeing justice claw its way out of this swamp, tap subscribe for the next twist. What's Hensley got up his sleeve to top a mob trashing her life? Could a single ally turn this tide, or is Nia doomed to drown in their lies? Nia Coleman hunched over a chipped Formica table in a rundown motel room on Atlanta's outskirts, the neon sign outside buzzing faintly through the thin walls. The air smelled of stale cigarettes and mildew, the 90-degree heat seeping in, despite the rattling window unit. 3 days into her trial, her life was unraveling, her apartment trashed, her name smeared across every TV in Georgia, and a jury that saw her as a stereotype, not a person. She'd swapped her grey blouse for a black tank top, her coiled hair pulled into a tight bun, sweat beading on her forehead. The motel was a temporary refuge, 30 miles from the courthouse, its peeling wallpaper and sagging bed a far cry from the safe houses she'd known in her CIA days. But safety was an illusion now, and she knew it. Her phone sat on the table, a lifeline in the chaos. She'd spent the night piecing together a plan, her cryptologist's mind sifting through options like code. Victor Hensley and Judge Harold Grayson had the system locked down, their racist cronies tightening the noose. She needed an edge, something to crack their narrative wide open. At 2 a.m., she'd reached out to an old contact, Jamal Reese, a wiry ex-CIA tech she'd worked with in Kabul 5 years back. He'd left the agency after a mission went sideways, but he knew her record, knew she'd decrypted intel that stopped a bombing in London. If anyone could vouch for her, it was him. His voice had crackled through the line, cautious but firm. "I'll do it, Naya. I'll tell them you're the real deal. Meet me at the courthouse tomorrow." Now, as dawn broke, a sliver of hope flickered in her chest. She showered in the motel's rusty stall, the lukewarm water barely cutting through the grime of the past days, then dressed in a charcoal skirt and white blouse, her armor against the storm. The cab ride back to Fulton County Courthouse was a blur of strip malls and kudzu-choked lots, the driver's radio blaring a talk show dissecting her lies. She tuned it out, focusing on Jamal's promise. He'd seen her in action, watched her save lives while Hensley was still chasing headlines. If he testified, the jury might hesitate, might question the prosecution's racist script. It wasn't a win, but it was a start. The courthouse loomed ahead, its stone steps slick from last night's rain, the air thick with the scent of wet asphalt. Reporters swarmed like flies, their cameras flashing as Nia stepped out, her head high despite the ache in her bones. Inside, the courtroom was a pressure cooker, the gallery packed with onlookers whispering behind their hands. Marcus Tate met her at the defense table, his suit rumpled, his eyes bloodshot from a sleepless night. "Jamal's here," he murmured, nodding toward a man in the back row. Nia glanced over. Jamal, 35, lean and sharp-eyed, his dreadlocks tied back, his brown skin glistening with sweat. He gave her a tight nod and she exhaled, feeling the first stirrings of relief. Hensley strutted in, his dark suit pristine, a stack of papers under his arm. Judge Grayson took the bench, his jowls quivering as he scanned the room, his gaze lingering on Nia with a flicker of disdain. The jury filed in, their faces a wall of skepticism, and Nia wondered if Jamal's word could pierce it. Marcus rose, his voice steady. "Your Honor, the defense calls Jamal Reese to the stand." A ripple ran through the gallery as Jamal stood, smoothing his jacket, and made his way forward. He swore in, his hand steady on the Bible, then settled into the witness chair, his eyes locking onto Nia's with a quiet strength. Marcus approached, hands in his pockets. "Mr. Reese, can you tell us how you know Dr. Coleman?" Jamal nodded, his voice clear. "We worked together at the CIA 5 years back. I was a tech analyst, she was a cryptologist. She cracked a code that stopped a terrorist attack in London, saved hundreds of lives. I saw it happen. She's no fraud." The jury shifted, some leaning forward, others frowning as if they couldn't square his words with the black woman they'd been told to hate. Nia's chest swelled. She'd done it. She'd found a crack in Hensley's wall. Then Hensley stood, a smirk playing on his lips, a manila folder in hand. "Your Honor, may I approach?" Grayson waved him forward, and Hensley handed the folder to the bailiff, who passed it to the judge. "Mr. Reese," Hensley began, his tone silky, "you claim you worked with Ms. Coleman, but let's talk about your credibility. Exhibit B, a criminal record from Fulton County, dated 3 years ago. Assault, theft, felony charges. Care to explain?" Jamal's jaw tightened, his eyes flashing. "That's a lie. I've never been arrested." Hensley turned to the jury, holding up a photocopy. "This says otherwise. Convicted felons can't testify reliably, can they? This man's a liar, just like his friend." Nia's stomach dropped as the jury murmured, their doubt palpable. Marcus leapt up. "Objection. This is fabricated evidence, Your Honor. We demand verification." Grayson skimmed the folder, his lips pursing. "I'll allow it for now. Mr. Reese's testimony is stricken until we confirm his status. Step down." Jamal rose, his fists clenched, and shot Nia a look of fury and apology as he returned to his seat. She gripped the table, her nails digging into the wood. Hensley had played dirty and Grayson had let him. Her glimmer of hope flickered, but she held on, praying Marcus could salvage it. Court adjourned for the day, the sky outside darkening, with fresh storm clouds. Nia slipped out a side exit, avoiding the reporters, and took a cab back to the motel, her mind racing. Jamal had been her ace, her proof she wasn't a fraud. Now he was tainted, and she was back to square one. She dialed him from the motel's landline, her burner phone dead from overuse. "Jamal, what happened?" she asked, voice low. His reply was terse. "I don't know, Nia. That record's fake. I'm clean. Hensley's got someone on the inside." She paced, the carpet crunching under her flats. "Meet me tonight, we'll figure this out." He agreed, naming a diner off Interstate 85, 10 miles away. She grabbed a hoodie, pulling it over her blouse, and took a bus to the diner. The rain starting again, drumming on the roof. Jamal waited in a booth, his face drawn, a cup of coffee steaming in front of him. "I'm sorry, Nia," he said as she slid in. "I didn't see this coming." She shook her head. "Not your fault. Hensley's a snake. We'll get proof. Clear your name." They brainstormed, sketching plans on napkins, contacting old CIA colleagues, digging into Hensley's allies. For a moment, she felt in control, the fight reigniting in her gut. Then her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "Check the news." She borrowed Jamal's phone, pulling up a local station's live stream. Her breath caught. A reporter stood by a smoldering wreck on a rural road, 20 miles north. "Breaking news. A car registered to Jamal Reese found torched in a ditch. No sign of the owner. Police suspect foul play tied to the Coleman trial." The camera panned to the charred husk, flames licking the night sky. Nia's eyes met Jamal's, wide with shock. "I was here," he whispered. "That's my car." She grabbed his arm, pulling him toward the back exit. "They're coming for you. We need to move." They slipped into the rain, the diner's neon fading behind them. But as they reached the parking lot, headlights flared. A black SUV screeched to a stop, 2 men in hoods piling out, guns glinting. Nia shoved Jamal behind a dumpster, her heart pounding. "Run!" she hissed, but he froze, staring at the wreck on his phone. The men advanced, their voices low, laced with slurs. "Where's your buddy, huh?" Nia realized it then. Hensley's reach wasn't just the courtroom. He had racist cops, maybe worse, hunting her allies. Jamal bolted, vanishing into the storm, and she ducked into an alley, the men's footsteps fading. Back at the motel, she locked the door, her breath ragged. Jamal was gone, alive, she hoped, but out of reach. The TV flickered on, the anchor speculating. Reese's disappearance raises questions. Is Coleman's defense unraveling? She sank onto the bed, the springs groaning, her hope snuffed out. Hensley hadn't just crushed her witness, he'd turned the night into a nightmare. She clutched her phone, the screen dark, and knew the truth. This was war, and he'd drawn blood. How much deeper could he dig before she broke? Nia Coleman sat in the Fulton County Courthouse on the 4th day of her trial. The air thick with humidity despite the faltering air conditioning, the temperature hovering at 92 degrees Fahrenheit. The wooden benches creaked under the weight of the gallery, packed tighter than ever. their whispers a low hum beneath the ceiling fan's lazy whir. She wore a slate blue dress, her coiled hair pinned back, her deep brown eyes fixed on the prosecution table where Victor Hensley shuffled papers with a predator's calm. 3 days of lies had battered her. A forged diploma, a sabotaged witness, her apartment trashed and now Jamal missing, his car a charred wreck. She'd barely slept, the motel's thin walls offering no shield from the dread gnawing at her. But she sat tall, her 42-year-old frame unyielding, a cryptologist trained to face chaos without flinching. Marcus Tate slid into the seat beside her, his suit wrinkled, his salt and pepper beard scruffier than usual. "We're pushing. Back today, Nia," he murmured, his voice a lifeline. "I've got a motion to dismiss based on prosecutorial overreach." She nodded, her jaw tight, clinging to the slim hope he could pierce Hensley's armor. Judge Harold Grayson took the bench, his heavy jowls glistening with sweat, his gray eyes sliding over her with a flicker of disdain. The jury filed in, their faces a wall of pale skepticism, some clutching coffee cups, others staring at her like she'd already been sentenced. She wondered what they saw. A black woman fighting for her life or a caricature they'd been taught to fear. Hensley rose, his dark suit crisp, a smirk tugging at his lips. "Your Honor, before we proceed, we have new evidence that demands immediate attention," he said, his voice smooth and cutting. The gallery hushed, necks craning as he signaled the bailiff. 2 Atlanta PD officers burst through the side door, their boots thudding on the marble floor, badges glinting under the lights. The taller one, a broad-shouldered white man with a buzz cut, sneered as he approached Nia, his partner, a lanky guy with a scar on his cheek, flanking him. "Nia Coleman, you're under arrest," the tall one barked, yanking her arms behind her back. The cold steel of handcuffs bit into her wrists, and the gallery erupted, gasps and shouts filling the air. Marcus leapt up, his baritone booming. "Your Honor, this is outrageous. On what grounds?" Hensley turned to the judge, unfazed. "On charges of evidence tampering, Your Honor. We've uncovered a hard drive in Ms. Coleman's motel room, loaded with fabricated CIA documents she intended to pass off as legitimate." The jury gaped, their eyes widening as Hensley held up a sleek black device, its surface gleaming under the courtroom lights. "This was found this morning, planted to bolster her crumbling defense." Nia's heart sank, her mind racing. She'd never seen that drive. It was a setup, Hensley's next move in his racist chess game. The officers hauled her toward the exit, their grips bruising her arms. Cameras flashed outside the courtroom doors, reporters swarming as they dragged her into the hall. "Smile for the news, sweetheart," the scarred cop muttered, his breath hot with tobacco, his slur barely veiled. "Always knew you people couldn't play straight." Nia twisted, glaring at him, but he shoved her forward, her flats skidding. "On the marble," the taller one chimed in, his voice a growl. "Should have stayed in your lane, Coleman." The word stung, a venom she'd heard too often, but she bit back her rage, knowing they wanted her to snap. They shoved her into a squad car parked out front, the 95-degree heat baking the leather seats, sweat trickling down her spine. The drive to the Atlanta police station was a blur of sirens and static, the radio crackling with dispatch calls. Inside the station, the air was cooler but rancid, reeking of sweat and stale coffee. They booked her in a cramped room, fingerprints smudging ink onto her hands. Her mugshot snapped under harsh fluorescent lights. "Fraud and now tampering," the booking officer, a wiry white guy with a mustache, sneered. "You're done." "Lady," she stared past him, her face a mask, refusing to let them see her crack. Back in the courthouse, Marcus argued furiously, his voice echoing through the now empty gallery. "This is a blatant frame-up, Your Honor. The prosecution's timing is too convenient." Judge Grayson leaned back, his lips pursed. "File your motions, Mr. Tate, but the arrest stands. Court's adjourned until tomorrow." The gavel banged, a death knell, and Marcus slumped, his hands trembling as he gathered his papers. Outside, the media frenzy exploded, helicopters buzzing overhead, news vans clogging the streets. "Coleman caught red-handed," screamed the headlines, the hard drive's image plastered across screens citywide. Nia sat in a holding cell, the concrete walls cold against her back, her dress creased and damp. She replayed the arrest, the cops' slurs, Hensley's smirk, the jury's gasps. This wasn't just about fraud anymore. It was a public execution. Her blackness, the real crime they couldn't forgive. She'd faced worse overseas, gunfire in alleys, interrogations in bunkers, but this felt dirtier, a betrayal by the country she'd served. Hours crawled by, the cell's silence broken only by distant shouts and the clang of bars. Then the door swung open, a female officer with a tight bun stepping in. "You've got a visitor," she said, her tone flat. Marcus appeared, his face haggard, a legal pad clutched in his hand. "They're holding you overnight, Nia. I'm working on bail, but Grayson's dragging his feet." She nodded, her voice low. "It's Hensley. He planted that drive." Marcus sighed, rubbing his temples. "I know, but we've got no proof, and it gets worse." He hesitated, then dropped the bomb. "They detained your mom, Ruth. SWAT raided her house in Decatur, claiming she's harboring a fugitive. She's at the station now." Nia's breath caught, her chest tightening. Ruth, 71, frail but fierce, caught in Hensley's crosshairs. "They what?" she whispered, her hands balling into fists. Marcus nodded grimly. "They tore her place apart, found nothing, but they're holding her anyway. Intimidation, pure and simple." Nia's vision blurred, rage and guilt surging through her. Ruth had raised her alone, worked double shifts at a diner to pay for Nia's books, cheered her through every milestone. Now she was collateral damage, a pawn in Hensley's racist vendetta. "Get her out, Marcus," Nia said, her voice steel. "Whatever it takes." He promised to try, then left, the cell door slamming shut behind him. Alone again, Nia paced the 6x8 space, her flat scuffing the concrete. The hard drive was a lie, but it had worked. The jury saw her as a desperate criminal, the public as a pariah. She imagined Ruth in a cell like this, her arthritis flaring, her pride battered. Hensley hadn't just targeted her, he'd gone for her heart. She sank onto the cot, the springs creaking, her mind spinning. She'd survived missions that should have killed her, cracked codes under fire, but this was a beast she couldn't outsmart alone. The walls seemed to close in, the air heavy with defeat. Outside, night fell over Atlanta, the city lights glinting through the station's barred windows. Nia lay back, staring at the ceiling, the concrete speckled with cracks. She'd thought the trial was her lowest point, but this, arrested, framed, her mother detained, was a new abyss. Hensley's power stretched beyond the courtroom, his allies in the police flexing their muscle to crush her. She closed her eyes, the image of Ruth's raided home searing her mind. Furniture overturned, photos shattered, a lifetime violated. This wasn't justice, it was war, and she was losing. But she wasn't broken, not yet. She'd find a way for Ruth, for herself. The question was, how? Feel like Nia's arrest proves the system's out to destroy her, not judge her. Drop a number 1 in the comments if you think Hensley's playing dirty because she's black and brilliant. Shocked they'd drag her elderly mom into this mess just to break her. Hit like if you're rooting for Nia to turn this trap into a takedown. And if you're gripped by this fight against a racist machine, tap subscribe for the next chapter. Picture this. Nia's locked up, Ruth's in cuffs. Can a single move from behind bars flip this nightmare on its head, or will Hensley's next strike bury them both? Nia Coleman sat on the edge of a cot in a federal holding cell, the concrete walls slick with condensation from Atlanta's unrelenting 94-degree heat. The 5th day of her ordeal had begun behind bars, her slate blue dress swapped for an orange jumpsuit, the fabric stiff against her skin. Her wrists still ached from the cuffs, red marks fading into her deep brown complexion, and her coiled hair hung loose, damp with sweat. The cell smelled of bleach and despair, a 6x8 cage that echoed with distant clangs and muffled shouts. She'd been arrested mid-trial, framed with a planted hard drive, and now her mother, Ruth, was detained 30 miles away in Decatur, caught in Victor Hensley's racist web. Nia's mind churned, a cryptologist's precision cutting through the chaos. She needed leverage, fast, or they'd both drown in this mess. Her one call had gone to Marcus Tate the night before, but the line was dead. The station's phones, glitchy from a storm rolling through. She'd paced until dawn, plotting her next move when a guard slipped her a burner phone through the bars, a cheap flip model, scratched and warm from his pocket. "From a friend," he'd muttered, a black man in his 30s with tired eyes, gone before she could ask more. She clutched it, her lifeline, and dialed a number she hadn't used in years. Evelyn Brooks, her old CIA handler. Evelyn, 52, sharp-tongued and steely, had guided Nia through missions in Moscow and Beirut, her voice a beacon in the dark. If anyone could pull strings, it was her. The call connected after 3 rings, static crackling over the line. "Nia?" Evelyn's voice was crisp, edged with concern. "What the hell's going on?" Nia exhaled, leaning against the wall. "I'm in deep, Ev. Fraud trial, planted evidence, cops on Hensley's payroll. They've got my mum too. I need proof of my clearance, something sealed or I'm done." Evelyn paused, then said, "I've got a file, your service record, redacted but legit. I'll bring it to court today, hang tight." Nia's chest loosened, a spark of hope igniting. "Thanks, Ev. Be careful. Hensley's got eyes everywhere." The line clicked off, and she hid the phone under the cot's thin mattress, her pulse steadying. Evelyn was her ace, a chance to flip this nightmare. Morning came, grey light filtering through the cell's narrow window, the storm's rumble, fading into a drizzle. Guards marched Nia back to Fulton County Courthouse in a van, the jumpsuit chafing her skin, her hands cuffed again. The courtroom was a furnace, the gallery packed with spectators fanning themselves, their murmurs rising as she shuffled in. Marcus met her at the defense table, his suit damp with sweat, his eyes wide with relief. "Got word from a contact," he whispered. "Evelyn's here with a file. We're moving to admit it." Nia nodded, her gaze sweeping the room. Hensley sat at the prosecution table, his wiry frame relaxed, a stack of folders beside him. Judge Grayson took the bench, his jowls slick, his gray hair plastered to his scalp. Marcus rose, his baritone cutting through the heat. "Your Honor, the defense has new evidence, a sealed CIA file verifying Dr. Coleman's credentials and service. We request its immediate admission." The gallery buzzed, necks craning as Marcus handed a thick envelope to the bailiff, its edges stamped with red classified ink. Nia's heart raced. She could taste victory, see the jury's doubt flicker. Hensley stood, his smirk faltering, for a split second before hardening. "Objection, Your Honor. This is a last-ditch stunt without public disclosure. It's inadmissible hearsay." Grayson skimmed the envelope, his lips pursing. "I'll review it in chambers, but I'm inclined to agree with Mr. Hensley. Transparency is paramount." Nia's hope wavered, but Marcus pressed on. "Your Honor, this file proves the prosecution's case is built on sand. Dr. Coleman's records are sealed for national security, not fraud." Grayson waved a hand, dismissive. "We'll see. Court's recessed for 1 hour." The gavel banged and Nia's stomach twisted. She caught Hensley's eye as he left, his smirk back, a predator sensing weakness. Marcus leaned close. "Evelyn's outside. She'll vouch for it in chambers if Grayson lets her." Nia nodded, her mind racing. If the file got in, Hensley's lies would crumble. She just needed Grayson to bend. The hour crawled by. Nia back in a holding room, the burner phone silent under her jumpsuit. Guards escorted her to the courthouse steps during recess, her cuffs off for a supervised breather. She spotted Evelyn across the street, a tall woman, in a tan trench coat, her graying hair pulled into a bun, a briefcase in hand. Their eyes met and Evelyn started toward her, then chaos erupted. A black sedan screeched around the corner, tires smoking, and 2 masked men leapt out, hoods pulled. Lo! Shots rang out, sharp cracks splitting the air, and Evelyn stumbled, blood blooming on her coat. She hit the pavement, the briefcase skidding into the gutter as screams filled the street. Nia lunged forward, but a guard yanked her back, his grip iron. "Stay put!" he barked as the sedan peeled away, vanishing into traffic. Cops swarmed the scene, radios blaring while Nia stared, her breath shallow. Evelyn lay still, her blood pooling in the rain-soaked street, a crimson stain spreading under the drizzle. The briefcase was gone, snatched by a third figure who'd melted into the crowd. Nia's knees buckled, the guard holding her upright as her mind reeled. Evelyn, her lifeline, her friend, gunned down in broad daylight. This wasn't random. It was Hensley, his racist allies striking again. Back in the courtroom, the recess ended, and Nia sat numbly, her jumpsuit damp with sweat and rain. Marcus rushed in, his face ashen. "She's alive, Nia. Critical, but alive. Hospital's got her. The file's gone, though." Nia's fists clenched, her nails biting her palms. "He did this," she whispered, nodding at Hensley, who stood at his table, adjusting his tie with a faint grin. Judge Grayson returned, his expression unreadable. "I've been informed of an incident outside," he said, voice gruff. "The defense's file is missing, presumed stolen. Without it, I'm ruling it inadmissible. No public disclosure, no admission." Marcus shot up. "Your Honor, this is sabotage. The prosecution's behind this attack." Hensley laughed. A sharp bark. "That's absurd, Your Honor. The defense can't produce evidence, so they cry conspiracy." Grayson banged his gavel, silencing the room. "Enough, Mr. Tate. Motion denied. Proceed with the trial." Nia's chest tightened. Her breakthrough shattered. The jury stared, their skepticism hardening. Another black woman's trick foiled, they thought. She saw it in their eyes, the same old story. She didn't belong, didn't deserve the benefit of doubt. Court adjourned, and Nia was hauled back to the holding cell, her mind a storm of rage and grief. Evelyn's blood stained her memory, a sacrifice for a file now lost. She sank onto the cot, the springs groaning, and replayed Hensley's grin. He'd hinted at this, hadn't he? That smug tilt of his head, a warning she'd missed. His reach stretched beyond cops and mobs, into the shadows, where power protected itself. She tasted triumph for a moment, the file in hand, only to have it ripped away, her friend nearly killed. Ruth was still detained, the trial still loomed, and now her strongest ally was bleeding out in a hospital bed. She pulled the burner phone from under the mattress, its screen dark. No calls, no messages. Evelyn was down, Marcus overwhelmed. She was alone, the walls closing in tighter. The guard who'd slipped her the phone passed by, his eyes averted, and she wondered if he'd known this would happen. Hensley's allies were everywhere, a racist machine grinding her down. She'd survived worse, she told herself. Nights in war zones, bullets whizzing past. But this was a different beast, personal and relentless. Evelyn's ambush wasn't just a loss. It was a message. No one could save her. Night fell, the cells. Window a black square against the storm's fading rumble. Nia lay back, the cot's metal frame digging into her spine, her jumpsuit clinging to her skin. She'd thought the arrest was rock bottom, but this, Evelyn's blood, the stolen file, Ruth's captivity was a deeper cut. Hensley had turned her fight into a slaughter, and Grayson had handed him the knife. She closed her eyes, the weight of it all pressing down, but an ember of defiance flickered still. She'd lost this round, but she wasn't out. Not yet. The question was who'd strike next, and how much more she could take before she broke. Nia Coleman stood on the steps of Fulton County Courthouse, the sixth day of her trial dawning, under a sky streaked with orange and gray, the air thick with 91-degree heat, and the acrid tang of tear gas lingering from the night before. She'd been released from holding that morning, the planted hard drive charge stalled by Marcus Tate's relentless motions, though the fraud case still loomed. Her orange jumpsuit was gone, replaced by a borrowed black blazer and slacks from Marcus, the fabric stiff against her sweat-damp skin. Her coiled hair hung loose, framing her deep brown eyes, which burned with a mix of exhaustion and defiance. Blood crusted her shoulder from a riot the previous day, a jagged cut beneath her sleeve. But she stood tall, her 42-year-old, frame unbowed despite the chaos swirling around her. The steps were a battlefield, littered with broken glass and crumpled signs, the aftermath of a clash that had erupted after Evelyn Brooks's ambush. Nia's story had gone viral overnight, her arrest and the attack on her CIA handler igniting a firestorm online. Black activists had rallied, flooding Atlanta's streets with chants of "Justice for Nia," their voices a thunderous counterpoint to the racist mobs Victor Hensley had stoked. She'd seen the footage from her cell, hundreds marching, fists raised, placards bearing her face. For a moment she'd thought it might sway the trial, might force Judge Harold Grayson to see her as more than a fraud. Now, free on a technicality, she stepped into the chaos, the crowd parting as she descended, their cheers washing over her like a balm. Marcus flanked her, his suit rumpled, his salt and pepper beard flecked with grey dust from the melee. "They're with you, Nia," he said, his baritone steady despite the strain. "This could shift the jury." She nodded, her jaw tight, scanning the faces. Young black women with braids and megaphones, older men in worn caps, kids clutching their parents' hands. They saw her, a cryptologist, a fighter, not the liar Hensley painted. She felt a surge of hope, a lifeline after days of blows, her apartment trashed, Jamal missing, Evelyn bleeding, Ruth detained. Maybe the public's roar could drown out the courtroom's whispers. Then the tide turned. A TV crew shoved through the crowd, a blonde reporter thrusting a microphone in her face. "Dr. Coleman, any comment on the latest leak?" Nia froze, her brow furrowing, as the reporter shoved a tablet at her. The screen blared a video time-stamped an hour ago, grainy footage of Nia in her motel room, her voice distorted but clear, saying, "I faked it all, the degrees, the contracts, just needed the cash." The words hit like a punch, her own face, staring back, lips moving in a lie she'd never spoken. The crowd hushed, eyes narrowing, and Nia's stomach dropped. Hensley's work, no doubt, doctored with tech she'd once used to trap enemies. The reporter pressed, "Is this true? Are you confessing?" Nia shook her head, voice firm. "That's fake. I never said that." But the damage was done. The video looped, captions flashing. Coleman admits fraud and caught in her own words. She heard murmurs ripple through the activists, doubt, confusion, betrayal. Then a new sound rose, jeers from across the street where a mob of white men in trucker hats waved Confederate flags, their voices a venomous chorus. "Told you she's a crook," one shouted, his beard streaked with tobacco spit. "Lying black trash," another bellowed, hurling a slur that cut deeper. Then the glass underfoot, chaos erupted. A brick sailed from the mob, smashing into the courthouse steps inches from Nia's feet, shards slicing her ankle. She stumbled, Marcus grabbing her arm as the activists surged forward, fists clenched, roaring back. "She's one of us," a woman yelled, her voice cracking with fury. Police in riot gear materialized, batons swinging, shoving the crowds apart. Nia ducked as another brick flew, this one striking her shoulder, tearing through her blazer. Blood seeped into the fabric, hot and sticky, and she gritted her teeth, the pain a sharp echo of Evelyn's fall. The TV crew filmed it all, the reporter, narrating breathlessly. Tensions boil over as Coleman's confession sparks violence. Marcus pulled her toward a side alley, his grip iron. "We need to get out of here," he said, his eyes scanning the melee. She nodded, her breath ragged, but as they moved, a cop blocked their path, his baton raised, his pale face twisted with contempt. "Back inside, Coleman," he snarled, his voice thick with the same hate she'd heard in the station. "You're causing this." She stared him down, her defiance flaring, but Marcus tugged her away, weaving through the crowd until they reached his car, a dented sedan parked 2 blocks off. Inside, the air was stifling, the leather seats baking in the heat. Marcus slammed the door, his hands trembling on the wheel. "That video's everywhere, Nia. Hensley's turning your own people against you." She pulled out her phone, borrowed from Marcus, and scrolled X. Nia fraud trended, the clip racking up millions of views. Comments poured in. Knew she was a scam, typical, lock her up. Worse, some activists wavered. If she lied, what are we fighting for? Her chest tightened. Hensley had weaponized her image, laced it with slurs to inflame the bigots, and now even her allies doubted her. They drove to a safe spot, a quiet diner 10 miles from downtown, its windows fogged with grease. Nia sat in a booth, her shoulder throbbing, blood staining her sleeve. Marcus ordered coffee, his voice low. "We can counter this, prove it's fake." She nodded, but despair gnawed at her. The public had been her shield, their support a balm against the courtroom's bias. Now it was gone, twisted into a noose. She'd thought freedom was a win, a chance to fight back. Instead, it was a trap, Hensley's racist allies striking from the shadows. Back at the courthouse, the riot raged on. sirens wailing as night fell. Judge Grayson emerged, his jowls quivering as he faced the press. "Due to public unrest caused by the defendant's presence, I'm declaring a mistrial," he said, his voice booming over the chaos. "Proceedings will resume when orders restored." Reporters swarmed, shouting questions, but Grayson retreated, leaving the steps a war zone. Nia watched the live feed on Marcus's phone, her heart sinking. A mistrial should have been a victory, time to regroup, but Hensley stepped up next, his wiry frame lit by camera flashes. "This proves Coleman's a danger," he said, his smirk venomous. "She's free, but not for long." Nia dropped the phone, her hands trembling. The crowd's cheers had turned to jeers, her win meaningless. She'd escaped the cell, but Hensley had caged her in public opinion, his doctored video a masterstroke. The diner's jukebox hummed, a stark contrast to the storm outside, and she stared at her reflection in the window, a woman bleeding, hunted, betrayed. Ruth was still detained, Evelyn fighting for life, Jamal lost. The trial was paused, but the war had escalated, Hensley's allies reveling in the chaos they'd sown. She'd thought the people could save her. Now they were another weapon against her. Marcus sipped his coffee, his eyes dark. "We'll fight this, Nia. They can't win forever." She nodded, but doubt clawed at her. She'd survived missions that broke lesser souls, but this was a beast she couldn't decode alone. The brick's sting lingered, a reminder of how close she'd come to worse. Hensley wasn't done. He'd turned her freedom into a curse. She leaned back, the booth's vinyl creaking, her mind racing. The public had turned, but she wouldn't break, not yet. She'd find a way to strike back, to reclaim her truth. The question was how, with the world against her. Think Hensley's fake video proves he'll stop at nothing to ruin Nia. Drop a #1 in the comments if you agree. This guy's a puppet master pulling racist strings. Feel like the crowd turning on her shows how deep the bias runs. Hit like if you're rooting for Nia to claw her way out of this pit. And if you're hooked on this roller coaster of justice and betrayal, tap subscribe for the next drop. Imagine Nia standing there, blood on her sleeve. What's Hensley's next move to tighten the noose, and can she dodge it before it chokes her? Nia Coleman stood on a cracked sidewalk in downtown Atlanta, the mistrial's chaos still ringing in her ears as the seventh day broke over the city. The sky hung low, heavy with 90-degree heat and the sour stench of burnt rubber from the whole riots. Her black blazer clung to her frame, blood crusted on her shoulder from a brick's graze, the cut a dull throb beneath the fabric. Her coiled hair was matted with sweat, her deep brown eyes scanning the street as she stepped out of Fulton County Courthouse, free but far from safe. The crowd had dispersed, leaving behind shattered bottles and trampled signs, the air thick with the echo of their jeers. Victor Hensley's doctored video had turned her allies into doubters, her freedom into a hollow shell. Marcus Tate lingered beside her, his rumpled suit stained with sweat, his salt and pepper beard catching the morning light. "We need to lay low, Nia," he said, his baritone rough with fatigue. "Hensley's not done." She nodded, her jaw tight, the weight of the past days pressing down. Her apartment trashed, Jamal missing, Evelyn shot, Ruth detained. The public turned. She'd thought the mistrial was a lifeline, a chance to regroup, but the streets felt like a trap, Hensley's shadow stretching long and dark. She adjusted her blazer, wincing at the sting in her shoulder, and started down the steps, Marcus trailing close. Then it happened. A crack split the air, sharp and deafening, and Nia's ear burned, a hot line of pain searing her skin. Blood trickled down her neck, warm and wet, staining her collar as she instinctively dropped, rolling behind a stone pillar. Screams erupted. Pedestrians scattering like leaves in a storm, their shouts swallowed by the echo of the shot. Marcus dove beside her, his eyes wide, his hand fumbling for his phone. "Sniper!" he hissed, peering around the pillar as another crack rang out, chipping the stone inches from his head. Nia pressed a hand to her ear, her fingers slick with blood, her pulse hammering. The bullet had grazed her, a whisper from death. She scanned the rooftops, her CIA training kicking in, spotting a glint of metal 3 buildings down, a sniper's scope catching the sun. "There," she muttered, pointing, but the figure vanished, a ghost in the haze. Sirens wailed in the distance, police swarming the scene, their radios crackling with confusion. A cop in riot gear approached, his pale face flushed, his voice barking over the din. "Stay down, we've got reports of activist radicals shooting." Nia's stomach twisted. Radicals? This was no protest gone wrong. It was Hensley, his racist machine, striking again, pinning it on her supporters to bury her deeper. Marcus grabbed her arm, pulling her toward an alley as the cops fanned out, their batons drawn. "We're not waiting for them to figure it out," he said, his breath ragged. They slipped through the crowd, Nia's ear throbbing, her blazer now a patchwork of blood and dirt. The alley was narrow, lined with overflowing dumpsters, the air ripe with rot. She leaned against a brick wall, catching her breath, the sniper's shot replaying in her mind. It wasn't random. It was a warning, a mark on her life. Hensley wasn't content with a mistrial. He wanted her dead, her story silenced before she could fight back. They reached Marcus's sedan, parked in a lot 2 blocks away, its dented hood gleaming under the sun. She slid into the passenger seat, the leather hot against her legs, and Marcus started the engine, peeling out onto Peachtree Street. "We'll hole up somewhere safe," he said, his eyes darting to the rear view mirror. Nia nodded, her hand still pressed to her ear, the bleeding slowing but the pain sharp. She'd survived worse, ambushes in deserts, close calls in slums, but this was personal, a bullet aimed at her soul. That night, she sat in a cheap motel 20 miles south of downtown, the room's faded curtains drawn tight, a single lamp casting shadows on the peeling walls. Marcus had gone to check on Ruth's detention status, leaving her alone with the TV flickering on mute. The news looped the sniper attack, an anchor speculating. Police suspect activist backlash tied to Coleman's release. She clenched, her fists, her nails digging into her palms. Hensley's spin was working, the public swallowing his lies whole. She flipped off the set, pacing the threadbare carpet, when a knock rattled the door. She froze, her hand hovering over the burner phone tucked in her pocket. Evelyn's gift, now her only link to the outside. She peered through the peephole. No one. Then she saw it. A folded note slid under the door, its edges yellowed, the ink stark. "You'll never prove it." Her blood ran cold. She snatched it up, the handwriting jagged, unfamiliar, but the message screamed Hensley. She crumpled it, her mind racing. He was taunting her, daring her to fight a war she couldn't win, but she wouldn't cower, not yet. She grabbed her phone, dialing a contact she'd used in her CIA days, a tracker named Lila Hayes, a black woman who'd hunted targets across continents. "Lila, it's Nia," she said when the line picked up, her voice low. "Sniper hit me today. I need you to trace it." Lila's reply was brisk. "Give me 12 hours. Stay alive." Nia hung up, sinking onto the bed, the springs creaking, under her weight. She'd find the shooter, expose Hensley's hand. She had to, for Ruth, for Evelyn, for herself. By dawn, Lila called back, her voice tight. "Got a lead. Militia compound, 30 miles east near Covington. Ex-cop types. White supremacist flags. Your sniper's one of them." Nia's pulse quickened. "Thanks, Lila, I'm going." She hung up, slipping into jeans and a hoodie from Marcus's stash, her blazer too bloodied to wear. She took a cab to a rental lot, grabbing a beat-up pickup with cash, and drove east, the sun climbing into a sky thick with haze. The compound loomed on a dirt road, a sprawl of tin-roofed sheds ringed by barbed wire, Confederate flags flapping in the breeze. She parked a mile off, hiking through pine thickets, the air buzzing with cicadas. Her ear still ached, but adrenaline dulled it as she crept closer, spotting guards with rifles slung over their shoulders. She needed proof, photos, names, anything to tie them to Hensley. She crouched behind a rusted tractor, her phone camera, snapping shots of a man with a shaved head, his scope glinting in the light. Then she saw it, a crate marked ATPD, Atlanta Police Department surplus. Her breath caught. Hensley's cops were arming these thugs. A twig snapped behind her, and she spun too late. A guard loomed, his pistol raised, his sneer baring. Yellow teeth. "Found the rat," he growled, his slur cutting through the stillness. She bolted, weaving through trees, his shouts echoing as more boots pounded the dirt. She reached her truck, keys shaking in her hand, and floored it, dust billowing as bullets pinged off the tailgate. The compound shrank in her rear view, but a new sound rose, a low whump, then a deafening roar. Her truck shuddered, the back window shattering as a fireball engulfed the vehicle. The explosion hurling her forward against the wheel. She swerved, glass slicing her cheek, and slammed the brakes, the truck skidding into a ditch. Flames licked. The wreckage, the heat searing her skin as she stumbled out, coughing on smoke. The militia had rigged it. Her rental, her escape, now ash. She staggered into the woods, her phone lost in the blaze, her body bruised but alive. Hensley's note burned in her memory. "You'll never prove it." He'd marked her with a bullet, then a bomb, his racist empire flexing its muscle. She sank against a pine, blood trickling from her cheek, her shoulder screaming. The cops would call it vandalism, pin it on radicals again, but she knew the truth. This was assassination, pure and simple. Night fell, the forest alive with crickets, the sky a bruised purple. Nia limped back to the highway, hitching a ride with a trucker who didn't ask questions, his rig rumbling toward Atlanta. She'd lost her evidence, her truck, her edge, but not her fight. Hensley had escalated from lies to murder, his allies, willing to burn her alive. Ruth was still caged, Evelyn still bleeding, and now she was a ghost, hunted in her own city. She clenched her fists, the pain grounding her. He'd marked her, but she'd mark him back, somehow, some way. The war had just begun. Nia Coleman stumbled through the pine woods 30 miles east of Atlanta, the 8th day dawning with a sky smeared gray by smoke from her torched truck. Her jeans were torn at the knees, her hoodie singed, the fabric clinging to her sweat-soaked skin. Blood crusted her cheek from a glass shard, her shoulder throbbed from the riot's brick, and her ear still ached from the sniper's graze, a trio of wounds marking Victor Hensley's escalating war. The 92-degree heat pressed down, the air thick with the buzz of flies and the tang of burnt metal lingering from the militia compound's trap. She'd escaped the explosion by inches, her body bruised but unbroken, her deep brown eyes blazing with a fury that kept her moving. She'd hitched a ride back to the city's edge with a trucker, then trekked 10 miles on foot, avoiding highways where Hensley's racist cops might spot her. Her phone was gone, lost in the blaze, but she knew where to go. A CIA safe house in rural Georgia, a squat cabin hidden off a dirt road near Jackson Lake, 40 miles southeast of Atlanta. She'd used it years ago during a counterintelligence, up its coordinates etched in her cryptologist's memory. If anyone could help now, Ruth detained, Evelyn shot, Jamal missing, the public turned. It was the agency she'd bled for. She reached the cabin by noon, its weathered wood blending into the pines, the air ripe with damp earth and moss. The door creaked open under her touch, unlocked, a faint whiff of pine cleaner greeting her. Inside, the space was sparse, a cot, a table, a single bulb dangling from the ceiling. She sank onto the cot, her legs trembling, and rummaged through a metal locker, finding a first aid kit. She patched her cheek with gauze, wincing as the antiseptic stung, then wrapped her shoulder, the pain a dull roar. Her 42-year-old frame ached, but she'd survived worse. Gunfights in alleys, bombs in bunkers. This was different, though. A betrayal by her own country, Hensley's machine grinding her down with every racist trick. A low rumble broke the silence, tires crunching gravel outside. Nia tensed, peering through a cracked window as a black SUV pulled up, its tinted windows glinting in the sun. A man stepped out, tall and broad, his dark hair cropped close, his tan trench coat crisp despite the heat. Daniel Pierce, 48, a CIA agent she'd met once in Langley, his hazel eyes sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses. He carried a briefcase, his stride purposeful as he approached. Relief flooded her. He was mid-level, not a handler like Evelyn, but he'd know her record. She opened the door, her voice hoarse. "Pierce, you're a sight for sore eyes." He nodded, stepping inside, his briefcase thumping onto the table. "Heard you were in trouble, Coleman. Brought something to fix it." He snapped the case. Open, revealing a thick file stamped top secret in red ink, its edges worn but intact. Nia's pulse quickened. She'd tasted this hope before with Evelyn, only to see it bleed out on the street. "My service record?" she asked, reaching for it. Pierce nodded, his tone clipped. "Full clearance, ops history, aliases. Enough to shut Hensley down if Grayson accepts it." She flipped through, her fingers trembling. Missions in Cairo, decrypts in Seoul, her life in black and white. "Thank you," she said, exhaling, the weight lifting for a moment. Victory felt close. A chance to free Ruth, clear her name. Then Pierce moved, swift and silent, drawing a Glock from his coat. The barrel gleamed under the bulb, aimed at her chest. "Sorry, Nia," he said, his voice flat, his hazel eyes cold. "Agency's cutting you loose. You're too hot. Trial, riot, sniper. They can't risk the exposure." Her breath caught, her hand freezing on the file. "What?" she whispered, her mind reeling. He cocked the gun, the click loud in the stillness. "Orders from upstairs. You're a liability now. Nothing personal." She stared at him, the man she'd trusted, the agency she'd served, and saw the truth. They'd abandoned her, a black woman too costly to defend. She lunged, years of training snapping into gear, ducking as he fired. The bullet splintered the wall behind her, wood chips flying as she tackled him, her shoulders screaming. They hit the floor, the gun skidding across the planks, and she drove, her elbow into his jaw, a crack echoing as he grunted. He swung back, his fist grazing her cheek, reopening the cut, but she rolled, snatching the Glock. She aimed it at his chest, her hands steady, her voice steel. "Why, Pierce? After everything I've done?" He spat blood, his glasses askew, his tone bitter. "You're collateral, Coleman. Hensley's got friends in high places. Agencies scared of the blowback." She held his gaze, her finger on the trigger, then lowered the gun, kicking it into the corner. "Get out," she said, her voice low, lethal. He scrambled up, clutching his jaw, and bolted for the SUV, the engine roaring as he sped off. Nia sank against the table, the file still open, her lifeline intact but tainted. She'd outsmarted him, kept the proof, but the betrayal cut deeper than any bullet. The CIA, her shield for 15 years, had turned its back, leaving her to Hensley's wolves. Then she smelled it, smoke sharp and acrid seeping through the floorboards. She spun, spotting flames licking the walls, a Molotov cocktail's glow flickering outside. Pierce hadn't fled. He'd torched the place, ensuring no evidence survived. She grabbed the file, stuffing it into her hoodie, and bolted for the door as the fire roared, heat blistering her skin. The cabin erupted behind her, a fireball swallowing the cot, the table, her last refuge. She stumbled into the pines, coughing on smoke, the file clutched tight, its edges singed but readable. Her cheek bled anew, her lungs burned, but she was alive, a ghost in the wreckage. She limped through the woods, the safe house's plume rising black against the sky, sirens faint in the distance. Hensley's reach had infiltrated the CIA, his racist allies pulling levers she couldn't see. She'd thought Pierce was salvation. Instead, he'd been a blade, the agency's final cut. Ruth was still caged, Evelyn fighting for breath. The trial paused but looming. The file was her weapon, but it came at a cost. She was alone, hunted by her own. She sank against a tree, the bark rough against her back, her hoodie smoldering. The sniper, the bomb, now this. Hensley's war had no limits, and neither did his hate. Night fell, the forest alive with crickets, the air cooling to 85 degrees, a mockery of relief. Nia tore a strip from her hoodie, wrapping her cheek. The gauze from the safe house lost in the fire. She'd survived, but the betrayal gnawed at her soul. The CIA had trained her to be invisible, a phantom slipping through shadows, but now they'd erased her, a black woman expendable in their calculus. She clutched the file, its weight a lifeline and a curse. Hensley had pushed her to the edge, and Pierce had shoved her over. She'd fight back, somehow, someway, but the ground was crumbling beneath her. Believe the CIA turning on Nia shows how far Hensley's claws reach. Drop a number 1 in the comments if you think she's been sold out by the very system she saved. Feel like her surviving that fire proves she's tougher than they'll ever know. Hit like if you're cheering for Nia to burn their lies to the ground. And if you're locked into this spiral of betrayal and fight, tap subscribe. There for the next clash. Picture Nia in those woods, file in hand. What's her next play to turn this stab in the back into a strike at Hensley's heart? Nia Coleman crouched in the shadows of an Atlanta alley, the ninth day breaking over the city, with a sky heavy and gray, the air thick with 88-degree heat, and the faint reek of garbage from overflowing bins. Her hoodie was charred at the edges, her jeans crusted with dirt, her cheek bandaged with a torn strip of fabric. The singed CIA file, her lifeline, was tucked inside her waistband, its edges brittle from the safehouse fire that Daniel Pierce had set to erase her. Bruises mottled her 42-year-old frame, her shoulder from the riot, her ear from the sniper, her cheek from the car bomb, but her deep brown eyes burned with a resolve that refused to break. Victor Hensley had turned the CIA against her, but she wasn't done fighting. She'd spent the night hiking back from the woods near Jackson Lake, 40 miles southeast, avoiding roads where Hensley's racist cops patrolled. Her phone was ash, her allies scattered. Ruth detained, Evelyn in a coma, Jamal missing. The mistrial had freed her from jail, but the sniper, the bomb, and Pierce's betrayal had marked her as prey. She needed firepower, literal and figurative, to strike back. By dawn, she'd reached a contact she'd used in her covert days. The Night Owls, a black hacker collective operating out of a basement in East Atlanta Village, 10 miles from downtown. She'd tapped them years ago to trace a cartel's digital footprint. Now they were her last shot. The hideout was a nondescript brick building, its windows boarded, graffiti sprawling across the walls. Nia knocked 3 times, a rhythm they'd know, and the door cracked open, revealing Zara Jones, a wiry 28-year-old with a shaved head and a piercing through her lip. Her brown eyes narrowed, then softened. "Nia, damn, you look like..." "Hell." Nia forced a grim smile, stepping inside. "Feel like it too. Need your help, Zara." The basement was a maze of blinking screens and tangled cables, the air cool with the hum of fans. 4 others hunched over laptops. Malik, a lanky coder with dreads. Tasha, a broad-shouldered woman with a buzz cut, and twins, Jay and Kia, both. Lean and quick-fingered, their afros bobbing as they typed. Nia pulled the file from her hoodie, its red top secret stamp stark under the fluorescent lights. "This is my CIA record," she said, her voice low. "Hensley's framing me, got the agency to cut me loose. I need you to crack it, leak it, show the world he's tied to a racist governor rigging this mess." Zara took the file, flipping through, her brow furrowing. "Encrypted as hell, but we can break it. Governor, huh? That's big." Malik grinned, cracking his knuckles. "Let's burn this bastard down." Nia nodded, sinking into a folding chair, her body screaming for rest but her mind razor-sharp. They worked fast, Zara scanning pages into a laptop while Malik and Tasha ran decryption algorithms, the twins cross-checking metadata. Nia watched, her cryptologist's brain ticking alongside theirs, pointing out patterns in the redactions. By noon, they'd cracked it. The file named Governor Richard Vance, a silver-haired white man with a plantation drawl, as Hensley's puppet master. Vance had funneled state funds to militia groups, supplied Atlanta PD with surplus gear, and leaned on the CIA to bury Nia's case, all to protect a network of racist power. "Got him," Zara said, her voice triumphant. Vance and Hensley thick as thieves. Nia leaned over, reading the screen. Dates, payments, coded messages linking Vance to the sniper, the bomb, Pierce's orders. "Leak it," she said, her tone steel. "Every platform, every news outlet, let them see the truth." Tasha uploaded it to X, the twins blasting it across dark web forums, Malik seeding it to local stations. Within hours, it exploded. Mon Nia Truth trended. The files, pages shared millions of times. Crowds gathered downtown, black activists cheering her name, their chants echoing off skyscrapers. "Nia's our hero. Down with Vance." Nia watched it unfold on a cracked monitor, her chest swelling. Vindication at last. She'd turned. The tide exposed the beast. Then the screen flickered, a news alert cutting through. Governor Vance declares martial law in Atlanta. Nia's breath caught as a live feed showed Vance at the state capitol, his jowls quivering, his voice booming. Due to unrest and national security threats posed by Nia Coleman's leaks, I'm imposing a curfew and deploying the National Guard." The camera panned to armored trucks rolling in, soldiers in riot gear flooding the streets. Naya's stomach dropped. Her win had backfired, Vance twisting her truth into a cudgel. "He's framing me as a terrorist," she whispered, her hands clenching. Zara cursed, slamming her laptop shut. "They're coming for us." Malik checked security cams. Militia vans circled the block, their Confederate flags flapping, men piling out with rifles. "Same bastards from Covington," Nia said, recognizing the shaved-head sniper among them. The basement's steel door rattled, boots pounding above, and Tasha grabbed a crowbar, her eyes fierce. "We fight or we run." Nia snatched a USB with the decrypted file, shoving it into her pocket. "Fight," she said, her voice low, lethal. She'd lost too much to flee now. The door buckled, splintering under a battering ram, and 6 militia stormed in, their guns raised, slurs flying. "Got you now, girl." Nia moved, CIA-honed reflexes kicking in, ducking a shot and slamming her elbow into the sniper's throat. He choked, dropping his rifle, and she kicked it to Malik, who fired, scattering the others. Zara swung a monitor, cracking a skull, while Tasha and the twins wrestled a third to the ground, their fists a blur. Nia tackled a fourth, her shoulders screaming as she pinned him, her knee on his neck. "Who sent you?" she snarled. He spat, grinning. "Vance owns this city. You're dead." Gunfire erupted outside, the militia retreating as guard choppers buzzed overhead, their spotlights piercing the basement. Nia released the man, shoving him toward the stairs, but the victory soured fast. A TV blared upstairs, stolen from a looted shop. Breaking news. Nia Coleman's hacker team captured. The feed showed Zara, Malik, Tasha, Jay, and Kia in cuffs, guns to their heads, live on every channel. Nia's heart stopped. They'd slipped out a back exit, thinking they'd won, only to be snared. Vance's voice cut in. "These terrorists aided Coleman's lies. Justice will be swift." Nia sank against the wall, the USB hot in her pocket, the file's triumph hollow. The streets outside roared with chaos, protests clashing with soldiers, tear gas clouding the air. She'd exposed Hensley and Vance, rallied the people, only to hand them a bigger whip. Her team, her family now, faced execution on live TV, their blood on her hands. She'd thought the leak was her counterstrike, a blade to their throats, but Vance had turned it into martial law, a racist empire flexing its might. The basement was a tomb, screens dark, chairs overturned, the fights, echo fading. She stumbled outside, the night sky lit by chopper beams, the air sharp with smoke. Her hoodie hung heavy, her cheek bleeding anew, her body a map of pain. Ruth was still caged, Evelyn still down, and now her team was lost. The leak had lit a fire, but Vance had doused it with tyranny, pinning it on her blackness, her brilliance. She clutched the USB, its data her last weapon, but the cost crushed her. She'd survived the sniper, the bomb, the CIA's knife, only to lose everything else. The city burned around her, a war she'd ignited and couldn't control. She'd struck back, but Hensley and Vance had won this round. Nia Coleman crouched in the shadows of an abandoned warehouse on Atlanta's outskirts. The 10th day dawning under a sky choked with smoke and the distant wail of sirens. The air hung heavy at 89 degrees, thick with the stench of oil and rotting wood. The city under martial law since Governor Richard Vance's decree. Her hoodie was tattered, her jeans stiff with dried blood, her cheeks makeshift bandage peeling away. The USB with the decrypted CIA file burned in her pocket, her last shred of proof against Vance and Victor Hensley. Her deep brown eyes glinted, with a fury that masked the exhaustion in her 42-year-old frame. Shoulder bruised, ear grazed, body battered from a sniper, a bomb, and a betrayal. But now her hacker team, Zara, Malik, Tasha, Jay, and Kia, was captured, guns to their heads on live TV, and she'd fight to her last breath to free them. She'd slipped out of the Night Owl's basement after the militia raid, evading National Guard patrols through alleys and back roads. The leak had exposed Vance's racist empire, but he'd twisted it into a weapon, declaring her a terrorist and her team his pawns. Ruth was still detained, Evelyn comatose, Jamal lost. The losses piled up, each a stab to her soul. The warehouse loomed ahead, a rusted husk 30 miles west of downtown. its broken windows glinting in the weak dawn light. Intel from a street. Contact, a janitor who'd overheard militia chatter, placed her team here, held by Vance's private army. She'd scouted it all night, her CIA training mapping every exit, every guard post. Her mind a steel trap despite the pain. The compound buzzed with activity, militiamen in camo pacing the perimeter, their rifles slung low, Confederate flags patched onto their sleeves. Nia counted 10, their boots crunching gravel, their voices laced with slurs. Gonna make examples of them. She slipped closer, her flats silent on the dirt, crouching behind a stack of oil drums. Her plan was simple: infiltrate, disarm, extract. She'd done it before, raids in hostile lands, silent takedowns under moonless skies. She spotted Zara through a cracked window, her shaved head bowed, hands bound, the others slumped beside her in a makeshift cell. Nia's chest tightened. They were alive, but barely. She moved, darting to a side door, its lock rusted and loose. A quick twist with a scavenged wire popped it open, and she slid inside, the air cool and dank, the floor slick with grease. Voices echoed from deeper in, a guard barking orders, a radio crackling with guard updates. She crept along a corridor, her back to the wall, until she reached the cell block, a cavernous room lit by flickering bulbs. Zara looked up, her eyes widening, a flicker of hope breaking through her exhaustion. Nia signaled silence, then slipped. Behind a guard, a burly white man with a buzz cut, snapping his neck with a swift twist, his body crumpling soundlessly. She grabbed his keys, unlocking the cell, her voice a whisper. Move fast. Malik, Tasha, and the twins followed, their wrists raw from ropes, their steps shaky but determined. You're insane, Tasha muttered, a grim smile tugging at her lips. Nia shrugged, handing Malik the guard's pistol. Stay close. They wove through the warehouse, Nia disarming 2 more guards with precise strikes, knees buckling, throats crushed, her CIA-honed skills a blur of efficiency. The exit loomed, a loading bay 30 feet away, freedom within reach. She tasted victory, her team at her back, the USB still secure. She'd outsmarted them, turned the tables, until the trap sprang. Floodlights blazed, blinding her as a dozen militia poured in, rifles raised, Hensley and Vance at their helm. Hensley's wiry frame gleamed with sweat, his pale blue eyes glinting with triumph, while Vance loomed beside him, his silver hair slicked back, his jowls quivering with rage. Nice try, Coleman, Hensley sneered, his voice cutting through the din, but you're predictable. Nia froze, her team huddling behind her, the pistol useless against the wall of guns. Vance stepped forward, his drawl thick. You thought you'd expose me? I own this state, you're nothing but a pest. Nia's mind raced, her grip tightening on the USB. You're finished, Vance. The world knows you're dirt. He laughed, a guttural sound, and signaled a militiaman who dragged a bound figure from the shadows. Ruth, her 71-year-old frame frail, her gray hair disheveled, her eyes wide with fear. Nia's breath caught, her knees buckling. Mom, she whispered, her voice breaking. Ruth shook her head, her voice trembling. I'm okay, baby, don't give in. Vance smirked, pulling a tablet from his coat, its screen glowing with a live feed. Say goodbye, he said, nodding to a militiaman with a camera. The feed cut to Ruth, a gun pressed to her temple, broadcast across Atlanta. This is what happens to traitors, Vance declared, his voice booming. Nia lunged, screaming, No! But Hensley grabbed her, his grip bruising her arm, pinning her as the shot rang out. Ruth crumpled, blood pooling on the concrete, her eyes glazing over. The world tilted, Nia's scream tearing from her throat, raw and primal, as the militia held her team back, their cries swallowed by the echo. Vance turned to the camera, his tone cold. Nia Coleman's rebellion ends here. Nia sank to her knees, Hensley releasing her, her vision blurring with tears and rage. Ruth, her rock, her heart, gone, executed to break her. The live feed looped, millions watching her mother's death, Vance's racist empire flexing its might. She'd saved her team only to lose the one she'd fought for most. Hensley knelt beside her, his smirk venomous. You're next, unless you surrender. She glared at him, her voice a hiss. Never. He laughed, standing as Vance signaled the militia. Take her. Guards seized her, dragging her to her feet, her body limp with grief, but her mind alight with hate. Zara and the others were shoved back into the cell, their shouts muffled as Nia was hauled outside, the warehouse's rusted walls fading behind her. The air hit her like a slap, thick with diesel and death, choppers buzzing overhead. Vance's private army loaded her into a van, its interior dark and stifling, her hands cuffed behind her. She'd thought she'd won, freed her team, only to watch Ruth die, a public slaughter to crush her soul. The van lurched forward, the city a blur through tinted windows, her mother's blood seared into her memory. They stopped at a militia outpost, a concrete bunker 10 miles north, its walls ringed with razor wire. Nia was shoved into a cell, its steel door slamming shut, the clang a final note in her defeat. She sank onto the floor, her hoodie soaked with sweat, her cheek bleeding anew, the USB still hidden but useless now. Ruth's death replayed, her plea, the shot, the fall, each frame a dagger. Vance and Hensley had turned her rescue into a nightmare, their racist wrath sparing no one. She'd outsmarted guards, reclaimed her team, only to lose everything. In a heartbeat, the cell was a tomb, its silence broken by distant radio chatter. Coleman secured. Operation complete. She curled her knees to her chest, her body shaking, grief and fury warring within. She'd survived the trial, the sniper, the bomb, the CIA's knife, only to be gutted by this. Ruth had believed in her, raised her to fight, and now she was gone, a martyr to Vance's hate. Nia clutched the USB, its edges cutting her palm, a lifeline she couldn't wield. The governor's wrath had struck, but she wasn't broken, not yet. She'd avenge Ruth, somehow, even if it killed her. Nia Coleman sat in a militia cell 10 miles north of Atlanta, the 11th day dawning with a sky-bruised purple, the air stagnant at 90 degrees, heavy with the tang of rust and sweat. Her hoodie was a shredded rag, her jeans crusted with blood and dirt, her cheeks bandaged gone, the wound raw and weeping. The USB with the decrypted CIA file pressed against her hip, her last weapon after Ruth's execution the night before, a gunshot that echoed in her skull, her mother's blood pooling on live TV. Her 42-year-old body bore the scars of Hensley's war, shoulder bruised, ear grazed, cheek slashed, but her deep brown eyes burned with a grief-fueled rage that drowned out the pain. Victor Hensley and Governor Richard Vance had taken everything. Now she'd take them down, even if it was her last act. The cell's steel door hung loose, its lock smashed by a guard's careless kick, a crack in their arrogance she'd exploit. She'd spent the night pacing the 6x8 space, her cryptologist's mind mapping the outpost. 10 militia, 2 exits, a radio tower 50 yards west. Her team, Zara, Malik, Tasha, Jay, and Kia, was still caged in the warehouse 30 miles away. But the capital was her target now, 15 miles south in downtown Atlanta. Vance and Hensley hid there, their racist empire trembling under her. Leaks fallout. She'd storm it, broadcast the file, end this nightmare. Ruth's death demanded it. She slipped out at dawn, the outpost quiet, guards dozing in the heat. Her flat scraped the concrete as she crept past a snoring man, his rifle propped against a crate, his Confederate patch glinting. She snatched a pistol from his belt, its weight cold in her hand, and moved south, hitching a ride with a farmer's pickup, its bed rattling with empty crates. The driver, a grizzled black man with a gray beard, glanced at her bloodied cheek, but said nothing. Dropping her 2 miles from the capital, Atlanta sprawled ahead, a war zone under martial law. Choppers buzzed, streets smoked, guard patrols clashed with protesters chanting her name. The Georgia state capitol rose like a fortress, its golden dome dulled by haze, its marble steps ringed with sandbags and soldiers. Nia circled it, her hoodie pulled low, spotting a service entrance guarded by one man, his rifle slung lazily. She waited, heart pounding, until he turned to light a cigarette, then struck, pistol butt to his temple, dropping him silently. She dragged him behind a dumpster, his keys jangling in her hand, and slipped inside, the air cool with marble and disinfectant. The halls echoed with radio chatter. Vance's voice barking orders somewhere above. She climbed a stairwell, her steps silent, the USB a lifeline against her skin. She reached the third floor, a broadcast room with screens and mics, its door ajar. 2 techs sat inside, white men in headsets, oblivious as she entered. She cracked, one skull with the pistol, the other lunging only to catch her elbow in his throat, collapsing with a wheeze. She locked the door, her hands trembling as she plugged the USB into a console. Its files blooming on screen. Vance's payments, Hensley's schemes, the CIA's betrayal. She hacked the feed with skills honed in Langley, overriding every channel. In Georgia, TVs, radios, billboards, her voice steady as she spoke. "This is Nia Coleman. The governor and Hensley framed me, killed my mother, run a racist empire. Here's the proof." The broadcast hit like a bomb, screens flaring with documents, Vance's face paling on a live feed as her words rang out. Outside, crowds roared, their chants shaking the walls. "Nia's truth! Down with Vance!" She'd done it. Exposed. Them to millions, avenged Ruth with cold, hard evidence. The door rattled, militia pounding, but she held her ground, pistol ready. Then it burst open, and Hensley stormed in, his wiry frame taut, his pale blue eyes wild. "You think this changes?" "Anything," he snarled, a revolver in his hand. She aimed back, her voice ice. "It ends you." He lunged and she fired, the shot grazing his arm as he tackled her, the gun skidding across the floor. They grappled, her shoulder screaming, his fist slamming her cheek, blood bursting anew. She kneed his gut, rolling free, and grabbed the revolver, pressing it to his temple. "For Ruth," she whispered, her finger tightening. His smirk faltered, fear flickering, but before she could pull it, the room flooded with SWAT. Black-clad figures loyal to Vance, rifles raised, shouting. "Drop it!" Nia froze, outnumbered, her victory snatched away. Hensley laughed, blood dripping from his arm as they cuffed her, the revolver yanked from her grip. "You're a terrorist now, Coleman," he said, his voice venomous. "Capital attack, live on air, death penalties calling." The SWAT dragged her out, her broadcast cut, the screens dark. Outside, choppers roared, guard troops swarming the steps, the crowd's cheers turning to screams as tear gas flew. She'd exposed them, but Hensley twisted it, framed her as the aggressor, a black woman storming the state, the perfect villain for his narrative. They shoved her into a van, its steel walls baking in the heat, her hands cuffed tight, cutting, her wrists. The ride was a blur, Atlanta's chaos fading as they reached a federal lockup downtown, its concrete bulk ringed with wire. Guards hauled her to a cell, its bars slamming shut, the clang, a death knell. She sank onto the cot, her hoodie soaked with sweat, her cheek pulsing, the USB gone, confiscated in the scuffle. She'd won the airwaves, lost the war. Hensley's frame-up was airtight. Her heroism flipped into treason. The cell's silence was suffocating, broken by a TV flickering through the bars, a news anchor's voice droning. "Coleman's capital assault confirms her danger. Death penalty sought." She stared at the screen, Hensley's smug face flashing as he testified, "She attacked me, threatened the state. Justice demands her end." Her stomach twisted. He'd played her, let her strike to bury her deeper. Ruth's death, her team's capture, now this. She'd fought to her limit, only to be caged again, the system's racist jaws snapping shut. A chopper's roar cut through, louder than the rest, hovering over the lockup. Nia glanced up, the sound jarring, a faint hope flickering. CIA extraction, late but possible. Guards shouted outside, radios crackling, but the cell door stayed locked, her fate sealed. She'd stormed the Capitol, broadcast the truth, held. A gun to Hensley's head, a final stand that shook their empire but landed her in chains. The chopper faded, leaving silence, and she leaned against the wall, her body a map of pain, her mind reeling. Vance and Hensley had countered her every move, their power unyielding. She'd avenged Ruth in spirit, but the cost was her freedom, maybe her life. Night fell. The cell's window a black slit, the air cooling to 82 degrees, a cruel tease. Nia curled on the cot, the springs digging into her back, Ruth's face haunting her, her plea, her fall. She'd exposed the truth, but Hensley had spun it into a noose, the death penalty looming like a guillotine. The chopper's echo lingered. In her ears, a question she couldn't answer. Rescue or illusion? She'd lost her team, her mother, her name, everything but the ember of defiance flickering still. This was her stand, glorious and doomed, and she'd face what came next. Head high even as the walls closed in, Nia Coleman sat on a concrete slab in a federal prison cell in downtown Atlanta. The 12th day dawning with a sky veiled in ash, the air stagnant at 87 degrees, thick with the musk of mold and despair. Her hoodie was gone, confiscated, along with the USB, leaving her in a gray prison jumpsuit, its fabric stiff against her sweat-slick skin. Her cheek's wound oozed, her shoulder ached, her ear throbbed. Scars of a war Victor Hensley and Governor Richard Vance had waged with racist fury. Her 42-year-old frame sagged, exhausted from the Capitol assault, her broadcast cut short, her arrest branding her a terrorist. Ruth's execution replayed in her mind, a gunshot that shattered her soul, and now the death penalty loomed. A noose Hensley had tied with her own defiance. The cell was a coffin, its steel bars glinting under a flickering bulb, the silence broken by guards' boots echoing down the hall. She'd stormed the Capitol, exposed their crimes to millions, held a gun to Hensley's head, her final stand, a blaze of truth snuffed out by SWAT. The TV beyond the bars droned, an anchor's voice cold. Nia Coleman faces execution tonight for her attack on the state capitol. Prosecutors call it justice. She'd lost everything. Ruth dead, Evelyn comatose, Jamal missing, her hacker team caged, the USB seized. Her deep brown eyes stared at the floor, grief and rage warring within, but a flicker of steel remained. She'd made them bleed, even if it cost her life. Hensley's testimony aired next, his wiry frame filling the screen, his pale blue eyes glinting with triumph. She stormed in, shot at me, threatened the governor. He lied, his arm bandaged from her graze, his smirk venomous. She's a danger to society, a fraud who turned terrorist. The death penalty's the only answer. The anchor nodded, the jury's verdict sealed. Guilty execution at midnight. Nia clenched her fists, her nails biting her palms. He'd framed her perfectly, her blackness the fuel for his narrative, the system swallowing his every word. She'd fought to her last breath, only to be buried in their lies. The cell door clanged open, two guards stepping in, their faces blank, rifles slung low. "Time to move, Coleman." The taller one, a white man with a buzz cut, barked, his voice flat. She stood, her legs trembling but her head high, the jumpsuit chafing her bruised skin. They cuffed her, the steel cold against her wrists, and marched her down a corridor, its walls slick with condensation, the air buzzing with tension. Outside, choppers roared, their blades slicing the night, a sound that had taunted her before. Rescue or illusion? She braced for the gurney, the needle, the end. They led her to a courtyard, a concrete square ringed with wire, floodlights blinding her. A black helicopter hovered above, its downdraft whipping her hair, its side unmarked, no guard insignia. She squinted, confusion flickering. Then the taller guard uncuffed her, shoving a hood over her head, the fabric coarse and suffocating. "Move," he growled, pushing her toward a ramp lowering from the chopper. She stumbled up, her hands free but blind, the engine's rumble vibrating her bones. The hood stayed on, her world dark as they strapped her to a seat, the craft lurching. Skyward, Atlanta shrinking below. Her pulse raced, her mind spinning. Was this execution or extraction? The flight lasted 20 minutes, the air cooling as they climbed, the hood stifling her breath. Then they landed, the ramp creaking open, and hands guided her out, the hood yanked off. She blinked, her eyes adjusting to dim light, a sterile room with steel walls and a single table. A man stood before her, lean and sharp-eyed, his dreadlocks tied back, his brown skin glinting under the bulb. "Jamal," she whispered, her voice cracking. He nodded, alive, unburned, his car fire a ruse. "Good to see you, Nia," he said, his tone steady. She staggered, her knees weak, as another figure emerged. Lila Hayes, the tracker, her frame. Wiry, her eyes fierce. "You're not dead." Lila said, a faint smile tugging her lips. Not yet. Nia's breath hitched, her mind reeling. What's happening? Jamal gestured to the table, a laptop open, its screen glowing. CIA black site 50 miles north. We faked your death. Hood, chopper, the works. Hensley thinks you're gone. He tapped the screen, revealing footage. A body bag zipped. Shut. Guard saluting, a news ticker screaming. Coleman executed at midnight. Nia sank into a chair, her body trembling, the jumpsuit damp with sweat. You were with them? She asked, her voice raw. Jamal nodded, his eyes dark. Faked the crash, went deep, infiltrated Hensley's circle, recorded everything, meetings, payoffs, Vance's orders. He played a file, Hensley's voice clear and smug. She's dead, Governor, we're clear. Vance's drawl followed. Good. Bury the rest, her team, the leaks. Then Jamal's coup, a hidden cam catching Hensley bribing Pierce, Vance arming the militia, every racist thread unraveled. She stared, her chest tightening. Jamal had turned her loss into a blade. We leaked it an hour ago, Lila said, her voice crisp. News everywhere. Vance and Hensley are indicted. Fraud, murder, treason. Their empire's collapsing. The screen shifted, showing arrests. Hensley cuffed, his smirk gone. Vance dragged from the Capitol, his jowls quivering. Crowds cheered. Nia's alive. Trending. Her name a rallying cry. Nia's eyes burned, tears spilling. Ruth's death avenged, her team freed, the truth unshackled. She'd won, but the cost scarred her soul. Jamal sat beside her, his hand on her shoulder. You're a ghost now, Nia. Agency's orders. Stay dead, stay safe. She nodded, her voice a whisper. Ruth? He shook his head, soft. She's gone, but she'd be proud. Grief clawed her, but relief dulled its edge. Hensley and Vance were finished, their racist reign toppled. The room hummed, a sterile cocoon, and Lila handed her a new ID. Nina Carter, a fresh alias, her past erased. You're free, she said, but invisible. Nia stood, her legs unsteady, the jumpsuit peeling from her skin. She'd faced the trial, the sniper, the bomb, the CIA's knife. Ruth's loss. Her final stand had burned bright, then dark, only to flare again in this twist. The world thought her dead, a martyr to their hate. But she lived, a phantom with justice in her wake. She'd lost her name, her mother, her life, but gained a reckoning. The chopper's roar faded, the black site a tomb for her old self, and she stepped into the shadows, her fight done, her spirit unbroken. Days later, Atlanta simmered, the heat dropping to 80 degrees, the air clearing as martial law lifted. News looped Hensley's fall, his wiry frame slumping in cuffs. Vance's empire dismantled, indictments piling up, their allies scattering. Nia watched from a safe house, a shack 50 miles south, its walls wood and dust. Jamal joined her, his dreadlocks loose, a laptop streaming the chaos. They're naming a street after you, he said, a faint grin breaking through. She stared at the screen, her alias a shield, her real name a legend. The safe house was sparse, a cot and a table, the air thick with pine and silence. She'd shed the jumpsuit for jeans and a tee, her wounds bandaged by Lila, her body healing but her heart raw. Ruth's face lingered, her plea, her fall. A wound time wouldn't close. She'd avenged her, toppled a racist throne, but the victory was bittersweet, her life now a whisper. The CIA kept her payroll, a desk job offered, but she'd stay. A ghost, her clearance a secret buried with Nia Coleman. Night fell, the shack's window framing a starlit sky, the city's chaos a distant hum. Nia sat on the cot, the springs creaking, Jamal beside her. What now? He asked, his voice soft. She exhaled, her deep brown eyes tracing the stars. Live, she said, simple and sure. She'd survived, turned defeat into triumph, a black woman who'd broken their chains. Hensley and Vance rotted in cells, their hate undone, and she'd walk free, invisible but alive, her mother's pride her final shield. Nia Coleman's journey reveals raw truths about resilience, systemic racism, and the cost of justice. Her story teaches us that courage isn't just facing danger. It's standing tall when the world labels you a fraud for being black and brilliant. Nia endured a trial rigged by prejudice, a sniper's bullet, a car bomb, and betrayal from the CIA she served, all while Hensley and Vance wielded power to crush her spirit. Her fight underscores how systemic bias turns achievements into accusations, forcing the marginalized to prove their worth against impossible odds. Yet, her refusal to break even after Ruth's execution shows that inner strength can defy the darkest oppression. The tale also exposes the fragility of truth in a racist system. Nia's leaked files sparked hope, only for martial law and lies to twist it into chaos, proof that justice requires relentless grit, not just evidence. Her faked death and Hensley's downfall highlight a bitter victory. Sometimes winning means losing everything, name, family, safety, to topple a corrupt empire. It's a call to question who defines hero and villain when power silences the voiceless. Nia's ghost status reminds us that survival can demand erasure, a sacrifice echoing the unseen struggles of countless others. So what's your take? Can one woman's fight dismantle systemic hate, or does her erased life prove the cost is too high? Drop a comment with your thoughts, hit like if Nia's fire inspires you, and subscribe for more tales of defiance. Share this if you stand against injustice. Thanks for joining her battle. May you find strength to challenge the shadows in your own world.